Hello everyone, I'm Leela Prabhakar and today we'll discuss class 11th economics, that is the chapter development experiences of India, a comparison with neighbors. Okay, so here in this lesson we'll learn about the comparison between Pakistan, India and China. Okay, how these countries are being developed from its independence. So, in today's globalized world, where geographical boundaries are slowly becoming meaningless, it is important for neighboring countries in the developing world to understand the development strategies being pursued by their neighbors. So, we have to understand what are the strategies being implemented by our neighboring countries, because this is important because they share the relatively limited economic space in the world market. In this unit, we'll compare India's developmental experiences with two of its important and strategic neighbors, Pakistan and China. Then, um, comparative development experiences of India and its neighbor. In this chapter, we'll learn about figure of comparative trends in various economic and human development indicators of India and its neighbor, China and Pakistan. Then we are going to access the strategies that these countries have adopted to reach their present state of development. Okay. Now, geography has made us neighbors, history had made us friends, economics has made us partners, and necessity has made us allies. Those whom God has so joined together, let no man put asunder. This is said by John F. Kennedy. Now, in the other units, we have studied what are the developmental experience of India in detail. Now, we also have studied what are the policies India adopted, which had varying impacts in different sectors. Now, over the last 2 decades or so, economic transformation is taking place in different countries, okay, across the world. Now, this is partly because of the process of globalization. Now, this has both short as well as long term implications for each country, including India. Nations have been primarily trying to adopt various means which will strengthen their own domestic economics. To this effect, they are forming regional and global economic groupings. Now, they are coming up with the SARC, European Union, Asian, G8, G20 summit, BRICS and all. Okay. Now, there is also an increasing eagerness on the parts of various nations to try and understand the developmental process pursued by their neighboring nations, as it allows them to better comprehend their own strengths and weakness. Okay. Now, this is due to the globalization, wherein in globalization all the countries are interlinked. Okay, they are also, we can also compare their progress. Okay, and one each country they can try to develop. Okay, and they can see their strength and weaknesses. Okay, by comparing. So, in the unfolding process of globalization, this is particularly considered essential by developing countries as they face competition not only from developed nations but also amongst themselves in the relatively limited economic space enjoyed by the developing world. Now, beside an understanding of the other economies in our neighborhood, this is also required as all major yeah in all major common economic activities in the region impinge on overall human development in a shared environment. So, in this chapter, we are going to compare the developmental strategies which are pursued by India and the two neighboring economics, Pakistan and China. Okay, so it has to be remembered that despite being endowed with vast natural resources, there is little similarity between the political power which is set up in India, the largest democracy of the world, which is wedded to a secular and deeply liberal constitution for more than a half century. Okay, so we'll start with the chapter, that is the developmental path, a snapshot view. So, do you know that India, Pakistan, and China, they have got many similarities in their developmental strategies? Now, all the three nations they have started towards their developmental path at the same time, while India and Pakistan became independent nation in the year 1947. People's Republic of China was established in 1949. Okay, in a speech at that time, Jawaharlal Nehru had said, these new and revolutionary changes in China and India, even though they differ in content, symbolize the new spirit of Asia and new vitality which is finding expression in the countries in Asia. Okay, so this is what Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru had said during that time. Um, all the three countries they have started planning their developmental strategies in their similar ways. Okay, so in when India announced the first 5 year plans in the year 1951 to 56, Pakistan also announced its first 5 year plan, now called the medium term development plan, in 1956. China announced its first 5 year plan in the year 1953. So since 2018, Pakistan is working on the basis of 12th 5 year development plan, that is from 2018 to 23, whereas China is working on 14th 5 year plan 21-25. So until March 2017, India has been following 5 year plan based developmental model. India and Pakistan adopted similar strategies such as creating a large public sector and raising public expenditure on social development. So till the year 1980s, all the three countries had similar growth rates and per capita income. So where do they stand today in comparison to one another? Now, before all this question, we'll have to trace all the historical path of China and Pakistan. Okay, so China will see first. After the establishment of People Republic of China under one party rule, all critical sectors of the economy, enterprises, and land owned and operated by individuals were brought under government control. Okay. Um, then, the Great Leap Forward, that is GLF, campaign initiated in 1958, which is aimed at industrializing the country on a massive scale. Now here people were encouraged to set up industries in their backyard. Okay, and in rural areas the commune system was started. Like they were people collectively cultivated lands. So in the Great Leap Forward GLF campaign met with many problems. A severe drought caused havoc in China, killing about 30 million people. When Russia had conflicts with China, it withdrew its professionals who had earlier been sent to China to help in the industrialization process. So in 1965, Mao introduced the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution in the year 1966 to 76, under which students and professionals were sent to work and learn from the countryside. So the present day fast industrial growth in China, it can be traced back in the year 1978. So China introduced the reforms in phases. In initial phase, reforms were initiated in agriculture, foreign trade and investment sectors. Okay, so in agriculture, for instance, commune lands were divided into the small plots which were allocated. Like this was not for ownership, okay, to individual household, and they were allowed to keep all income from the land after paying stipulated taxes. So, in the later phase, reforms were initiated in the industrial sector, private sector firms in general, and township and village enterprises. So, that is those enterprises which were owned and operated by local collectives. In particular, they were allowed to produce goods. So at this stage, enterprises owned by government, known as state-owned enterprises or SOEs, um, so this were also in India, it is called as public sector enterprises, were made to face the competition over there. Okay, so the reform process also involved, dual pricing, and this means fixing the prices in two ways. That is, farmers and industrial units were required to buy and sell fixed quantities of inputs, okay, and outputs on the basis of prices fixed by the government, and the rest were purchased and sold at market prices. Over the year, as production increased, the proportion of goods or inputs transacted in the market also increased. So in order to attract the foreign investors, special economic zones were set up. Let's see the another case of our neighboring state, Pakistan. While looking at various economic policies that Pakistan adopted, you will notice many similarities over here. So Pakistan also followed the mixed economy model, with coexistence of public and private sector. Okay, so in the late 1950s and 1960s, Pakistan introduced a variety of regulated policy framework, um, for import substitution, and the policy combined tariff protection for manufacturing of consumer goods together with direct import controls on computing imports. The introduction of green revolution, this led to mechanization and increase in public investment in infrastructure in selected areas. Okay, now this led to a rise in the production of food grain, and this changed their agrarian structure totally. So if you see in the year 1970s, nationalization of capital goods industries took place, and Pakistan they then shifted its policy orientation in the late 1970s to 1980s, when the major thrust areas were denationalization and encouragement of private sector. So during this period of time, Pakistan also received as financial support from Western nations and remittances from continuously increasing outflow of immigrants to the Middle East. So this helped the country in stimulating economic growth. Okay, so also a government did offered a various incentives to the private sector, and all this created a conducive climate for new investment. So so let's now compare the developmental indicators of India, China, and Pakistan. Demographic indicators. So if we look at the global population, out of every 6 person living in this world, one is an Indian, no, and another a Chinese. So we'll compare the demographic indicators of India, China, and Pakistan. The population of Pakistan is very small, okay, and accounts for roughly about 1/10 of China or India. So though China is the largest nation and geographically occupies the largest area among the three nations, its density is very low. Okay, so if you see table 8.1, if you see the estimated population, um, India and China it's more, and annual growth of population also you can see. So if you see the table 8.1, that population growth as being the highest in Pakistan, followed by India and China. Okay, then scholar points out the one child norm introduced in China in the late 1970s as a major reason for low population growth. So if you see, um, so they also state that this measure led to decline in the sex ratio, the proportion of females per 1000 males. So however, scholars cite some preference prevailing in all these countries as a reason. So in the recent time, all the countries they are adopting a various measures, okay, to improve the situation. One child norm and the resultant arrest in the growth of population also have other implications. For instance, after a few decades in China, there will be more elderly people in proportion to young people. This led China to allow couples so that they can have two children. The fertility rate is also low in China and very high in Pakistan. And if you see, urbanization is high in China as compared to India and Pakistan. Next, we'll see about the gross domestic product and sectors. Okay, so GDP is nothing but it's the total value of goods and services produced in a domestic territory during an accounting year. Okay, so one of the much talked issues around the world about China is its growth of gross domestic product. Now, the China has the largest GDP, that is $22.5 trillion in the world, whereas GDP in India is 9.03 trillion and Pakistan's is 0.94 trillion. So when many developed countries were finding it difficult to maintain a growth rate of even 5%, China was able to maintain a double digit during the year 1980s, as can be seen from table 8.2. So if you see this table 8.2, the GDP growth of India and Pakistan is slow in the year 1980 and 1990s. So but if you see in 2015, 2017, it has increased. India's GDP has increased. Okay. Now in 2015-17, there has been a decline in Pakistan's GDP. Okay. Some scholars hold the reform processes introduced in Pakistan and political instability over a long period as reasons behind declining growth rate in Pakistan. Okay. So if you see figure 8.3, industry in India, China and Pakistan, so there are various sectors wherein the people are involved, okay, like car, cement, chemicals, coal, electronics, engineering, finance, food processing, oil and gas, textiles, iron and steel, okay. Now, uh, first look at how people engage in different sectors. Okay, and now this is called as gross value added. Now it was pointed out in the previous section that China and Pakistan have more a proportion of urban population than India. Now in China, due to the topographic and climatic conditions, the area suitable for cultivation it is relatively small. Okay, and only about 10% of its total land area. The cultivable area in China is account for only 40%. Okay, until the 1980s, more than 80% of the people in China were dependent on farming as their sole source of livelihood. But since then, the government encouraged people to leave their fields and pursue other activities such as handicraft, commerce, and transport. In 2018 till 19, with 26% of its workforce engaged in agriculture, its contribution to the gross value added in China is 7%. Now, in both India and Pakistan, the contribution of agriculture to gross value added was 16 and 24% respectively. But the proportion of workforce that works in this sector is more in India. Now, if you see in Pakistan, about 41% of people work in agriculture, whereas in India, it is only 43%. Okay. So this is what comparisons sectoral share of employment and gross value added is being seen over here. Okay, with regards to different sectors, that is agriculture, industry, and service sector. Okay. So in the normal course of development, countries they first shift their employment and output from agriculture to industry and then the services. Now this is what is happening, okay, in China. The proportion of workforce engaged in industry in India and Pakistan were low at 25% and 24% respectively. So the contribution of industries to gross value added is at 30% in India and 19% in Pakistan. So in these countries, the shift is taking place directly to the service sector. Now, all the three countries, the service sector is emerging as a major player. Now, it contributes more to GVA and at the same time emerges as a prospective employer, the future employer, you can say. So, if we look at the proportion of workforce in the 1980s, Pakistan was faster in shifting its workforce to service sector than India and China. Okay, then so if you see in the last 5 decades, the growth of agriculture sector, which employs the largest proportion of workforce in all the three countries, this has declined and it has shifted to the service sector. Now in the industrial sector, China has maintained a near double digit growth rate in 1980s but began showing decline in the recent year. Okay. Then we'll move to the next part, that is indicators of human development. So these are some of the selected indicators of human development. Okay. This is the like the first human development index, then rank based, then life expectancy, means of years of schooling, gross national income per capita, then infant mortality rate, population using at least basic sanitation, then percentage of undernourished children. So these are some of the indicators of human development as per the report of 2017-19. So if you see this table, 8.5, then China is moving ahead of India and Pakistan. So if you see all the index, China is ahead of us. Then this is true of for many indicators. Okay, income indicators such as GDP per capita or proportion of population below poverty line, or health indicators, okay, such as mortality rate or life expectancy, sanitation, literacy. So China, if you see, it is ahead of China and Pakistan, these are ahead of India in reducing proportion of people below the poverty line. Okay, but India and Pakistan have not been able to save women from maternal mortality. If you see this graph, if you see the maternal mortality rate, uh, in India it's 133 and in Pakistan is 140, whereas in China is only 29. Okay, so in China, for 1 lakh births, only 29 women die. Okay, but whereas in India and Pakistan, about 133 and 140 women die respectively. So surprisingly, all the three countries report providing improved drinking water sources for most of its population. Okay, and the China has the smallest share of poor among the three countries. Now, we should also note a problem while using the human indicators. Okay, this occurs because these are all extremely important indicators, but these are not sufficient. Okay, along with this we also need what may be called liberty indicators, and one such indicators has actually been added as a measure of the extent of democratic participation in social and political decision making, but it has not been given any extra weight. Okay, some obvious liberty indicators like measures of the extent of constitutional protection, given the rights to the citizens, or the independence of the judiciary and the rule of law have not been introduced so far. Okay, so without this giving them overriding importance in the list, so it is like incomplete. Okay, and its usefulness is limited over here. Okay, so this is all with regards to the indicators. For the next class we'll discuss about the development strategies and appraisal. Okay, um, yeah, thank you for watching my video.